Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Shama Farag from Stay Artistic Podcast. Today, we are having a great conversation. We'll be having, inshallah, a great conversation with our lovely guest, Ustadha Rukayat Yakub. Ustadha Rukayat Yakub, this is a little bit of introduction. Ustadha Rukayat Yakub, I was introduced to her through Sister Adasha when I was seeking an anti-blackness training. Ustadha Rukayat Yakub is an award-winning children's author, educator, publisher, trainer, consultant, and a school culture coach. Ustadha Rukayat has worked in education for 25 years, mashallah. Her expertise includes Heartwork Training that addresses anti-blackness to build spaces of prophetic belonging and integrated curriculum design, history, and ethical wealth flow. Through Heartwork Training, she helps leaders, educators, and parents to develop and implement best practices that infuse prophetic courage, kindness, and humanity in community institutions and spaces. She's the author of the 2023 Black Belonging Study and serves, mashallah, and serves as an instructor at Ribaat Academic Institute. She received her teaching certification in Montessori elementary education and earned her Master's of Art in Islamic Education. She's working on a doctorate in ministry to further her studies in belonging and community development. Welcome, Ustadha Rukayat. It's great to see you today. Without further ado, you can start from there.
Assalamu alaikum. It's such an honor to be here, and it's lovely to be with you again. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. It's an honor to have you, and especially during the Black History Months. I love to have you. It's not only because it's Black History Month, but because of your great work and the experience I have with you. And I have some few questions, and you can go ahead. It's your program, you know. I would love for you to go and introduce yourself and introduce people to your work. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
So my name is Rukayat Yakub. I actually live in Houston, Texas, but I was born in England. I grew up there, and I actually spent part of my childhood in Nigeria. I had the blessing of being in both places, and I actually moved to America at 25. So when I actually moved to America, I really knew very little about American history. I didn't really understand how race worked in America, why things were the way they were, and I had to start from zero basically. And I'm very grateful for the mentors I had around me who actually helped me, by listening to my questions, um, allowing me to study with them, inviting me to read certain books, and just giving me an experience of that kind of like community education. I've been a teacher for many, many years. I had my first classroom in 97. So yeah, 97. And I I find it such an honor to get to work with children. And part of it is just because children are just so open and excited and engaged. Generally, they love to learn, and they're excited about learning. So working in that kind of environment makes me excited about, teaching and learning too. And I also get to write children's books, which is something that I love doing because as a amateur historian, this is my other love. Private education is history. Being able to write books for children that teach them about the past, that actually center them. Because usually I write books that where the protagonist is a child, or at least is starting out as a child. You get to see, how people were shaped by what was going on around them and how they actually help shape history as well. And one of the reasons why I got into, working in the field of understanding or looking at anti-blackness is recognizing how this is something that causes a lot of harm, of course, around us, but also it's unavoidable. It's something that we don't have to be invested in. It's actually a choice that we get to make when we decide to act a certain way with a group of people. And I'm going to define anti-blackness because sometimes we hear the word and it's like, what is she actually referring to? So there's a definition that comes from a professor at Northwestern University, Dr. Kehana Ross. And she has a long definition, but the main key part of it is the inability to see and value Black humanity. And this is one of the ideas upon which this society, i.e., America, United States of America, was founded.
Mm.
Because how do you convince your conscience that it's okay to extract people from their homes, to separate mothers from their fathers, to
Mm,
separate mothers from their fathers, from children from their parents, from spouses from each other. How do you go and you rip families apart and then you bring them over to another land and enslave them and take away or attempt to take away their culture, their history, and their language and their religion and their
mm,
ability to be able to, determine their own life and ability to own property and all of these things in order to enrich yourself out of greed, you know,
mm,
and recognizing that this is something that was able to quieten the conscience of white America. It's like,
mm.
well, because if you believe a person isn't really human, you can do these things. As you see someone as a
Dehumanizing
human
them.
being,
Mm,
then you don't. You're gonna treat them differently.
mm,
And also there's a story of where Malcolm was being interviewed, the reporter, is talking to the reporter. Malcolm says to him, Malcolm X, he says to him, I want to wake my people up. And the reporter says, oh, you want to wake them up to the injustice that they're experiencing? And Malcolm says, no, I want to wake them up to the humanity. Because he recognized that for many of his people, they've been convinced that they don't have human value, they don't have worth, that they are not important, they aren't beloved to God or
mm,
of importance to society. And if you begin to internalize those ideas, you're gonna respond in a certain way. And he recognized this is one of the roots of the problem. So he wanted to show them like you are loved, you are important, you are special. God created you just like he created all the other human beings. And you have value because in the Quran, I don't know if your audience is a general audience or not, but if it's not, I do want to share this particular part of scripture where it says in the Arabic, it says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي Adam, that indeed God, our creator, has ennobled the children of Adam, i.e., all humanity have been gifted innate dignity. And that's not something that is earned or you get to decide as one person or the other. This is just a gift that God has given to humanity, you know? So when you're interacting with people, you're remembering that every human being has been given that. It's not just one portion for the whites, one portion for blacks, one portion for Asians or Arabs or whatever. This is a gift to humanity, and no one gets to take that away. And so when I look at what he's doing, when I look at what coming out of Dr. Kahana Ross, I'm recognizing that part of the challenge that we have in our society is, do we really recognize people's humanity?
mm.
Are we able to value it? And if we're not, why not? What is the underlying reason for that?
Mm. That's amazing, and I love how you highlighted the interview with the great Malcolm X when he talked about, because I saw a curriculum, school curriculum, public school curriculum, and I really didn't like how they highlighted him in a negative light, and I love how you stressed out the human part, the good part that he wanted to share with others and talk about when he was interviewed. Thank
I
you for
think
that.
the challenge is when we talk about Malcolm is that we extract him from his world. So
Hmm.
we don't look at him within the context of the world that he lived in. And if
Hmm.
everyone lived in that kind of context, if you were, a person with a heart full of love, you probably would respond like Malcolm. If you were full of hatred, you would respond a lot worse because it was a horrific environment. And I think we have to really, it's not really fair to our children to give them this one-sided, this one-dimensional idea of who he is,
Hmm.
because then
Right.
they don't get to really understand what his world was like and how when you are living in a society that hates you, that despises you, that disrespects you, you're going to want to say, you know what, this isn't okay. And that's really what he was doing. He wasn't calling for violence against the country. The way his story is told, it's really an injustice because it's not actually accurate. It's different if he was doing those things. And even if he was, considering the time period, one would understand why a person would do that. But he actually had a lot of restraint considering his life experiences.
Yeah, yeah. When I would encourage people to read his biography if you haven't done yet, because it's humanizing, it's explaining, it's very intellectually rich, and it's a real human experience. And you feel like you can empathize, and with whatever he has been through. And of course, you will have, if you're a human with good heart, you would believe the same. It was I heard so many convert brothers and sisters and so many people from in the American community, Muslims and non-Muslims, say things about his biography and say that how it was life altering for them. So I have the next question is how you started and why do you think your anti-blackness work is important?
Okay, how I started. Oh, that's a great question.
Mm.
So, so can I just ask your audience, how f familiar are they with the Muslim community?
Mm.
Because that will help
Uh,
me answer the question. Your audience that we're talking to, how familiar are they with the Muslim community?
well, I have a very diverse community, diverse audience. I have people in Egypt,
Okay,
in Arab world, and in America, in all of the Southern
okay,
America, and
excellent.
Malaysia, yeah,
Oh, nice. Okay, all right. So
and
what?
UK.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Okay, so the reason why I got into this work, to be honest, is that I was in a I was studying with a particular teacher, an amazing mentor, and I noticed like around me in my community, within the mosque, and also with even online, that there just seemed to be this lack of interest in the issues that were impacting the Black Muslim community. And I felt like as Muslims, we should care about humanity because I feel that that's one of the things that we've been charged with. If we've been asked to be stewards of the earth, be the Khalifa of the earth, then we had to be caring not just about the vegetation of the earth and the air quality, which are all very important, the animals and wildlife, but also the human beings who are on this earth. So my thing is, if there's something that's hurting somebody in society, that should be of your concern. And what I noticed is that there wasn't this concern, and this is around 2019. So this is before the whole murder of George Floyd, but there were a whole slew of murders that were happening that were being televised at this time period. And I just felt like, why? Why wasn't there this interest in what was going on? So I was speaking to my mentor, and I said to her that I'm just disappointed. I kind of just vented about how I felt. And a part of the reason as well is that there was a murder. Some of you might be familiar with the story, Jean Botham, where this police officer goes into her apartment complex. And in this particular city in America, the apartment complexes are very similar. And she's actually, texting her her her
So texting on her
she's just
phone. Yeah.
texting. She's not paying
Mhm.
attention. So she goes into the wrong building. She goes into someone else's building and she sees this man in there and she's shocked because she thinks she's in the right building. She's a police officer. She takes out her gun, she shoots him. When she realizes it's wrong, she doesn't call the ambulance. She doesn't try to fix things. She basically just leaves. Okay. So when this happened, a little while later, she ends up going to court and everything. And then one of the family members was expressing, that he forgives her and everything. And there was a lot of empathy for this particular police officer, who is, a white blonde lady. And I was telling the story during one of my Sira class. I was teaching a story about the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, but for some reason this idea came up, and that's why I connected it to the modern day issues that are going on. And I noticed that after I did that class, the class numbers halved, So I was just like, oh, okay. And then this was going on, and I just was feeling just disheartened by what I felt was supposed to be sisterhood within within my faith community. So I was speaking to my mentor, and she said, "What do you want to do about it?" And I said to her, well, I think there should be a class for Muslim women in particular so they can understand the history of race in this country. Because I think if people understand history, they will have empathy. And if you have empathy, you're going to care about what's going on. You're going to at least pray about these things. Even if you're not going to, physically change it or attempt to change it, at least it's in your consciousness. And you're going to say, you know what? When I wake up in the middle of the night, in my prayers to my Lord, to my Creator, I'm going to raise my hands and ask regarding this, that there be justice and fairness and the good treatment of the Black Muslim community and Black community and all of those people who are mistreated in society, to be honest. And as I told her that, she's like, okay, you go ahead and design the curriculum and we will make it a course in the seminary that she designed, that she taught at. And I was thinking to myself, well, I wasn't volunteering myself, but this is my mentor and she's offering this to me. And I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. So I did it. I spoke to different people because I'm not an expert. I'm an educator. Like I said, I'm an amateur historian. These are things that I care a lot about, and I'm a mother. But I wasn't like trained in like ethnic studies or race studies or the history of racism, any of these things. But I felt like this faith as Islam gives us a way to understand the world. One of the foundational understandings is that human beings have innate dignity. Another one is that the way we use our tongue, the way we use our hands, it needs to be in service to humanity, not in harming. So whether it's the things that we say, the way we treat people, all of these are important because sometimes people think, well, I'm not harming anybody. But the reality is you are. And sometimes we might not be intentional about it, but we have to be mindful because we have a responsibility for how we act, how we use our gifts in the world. And if we're using it to hurt people, we're actually going to be responsible for that. So, I designed the course, and that's kind of how I started teaching in this area. And then Islamic, what do you call them? College group, they asked me to come to their campus to talk about this. So I thought to myself, the course I teach is a whole semester long. How do I go to a college campus and put this all into a 90-minute talk, So that's when I decided to look at it, and I distilled the essence of what I was looking at. And I termed it heart work. Because the idea here is that we have to work on our hearts, because our heart is supposed to be that gauge that lets us know what's right and what's wrong. But if we don't work on our hearts, we're not going to be able to do that. We're going to treat people with a heart full of arrogance, we're going to mistreat people. With a heart full of resentment, we're going to mistreat people. But when we work on purifying the heart, i.e., we're taking out those qualities that are blameworthy, arrogance, envy, all of these things, and we're replacing them with those qualities of humility, of love of God, of love of righteousness, of patience, of gratitude. It changes you up. So I thought to myself, we can apply this to any social issue. So I took the issue of anti-blackness, that inability to see Black humanity, which is fueled by the myths that are around us in society, the myths that tell us that Black people are this, that, or the other. You fill in the gap. We always hear these stories and these ideas that we have about Blackness, and people that say these things, a lot of the time, they never had any real interaction with the Black community. It's based on stereotypes. So in Heartwork, the idea is like to uproot those stereotypes, those myths, those biases, and replace it with truth. How do we gain truth? The fact that the Quran Ta'ala gives us truth. We learn the truth from, different sources, but one of them is actually spending time with the Black Muslim community, learning about history, studying these things. Because when you engage in this, you're going to recognize what actually is true and what actually is false. So this is really where this idea comes from and how I started doing this work.
Yeah, people have to be careful about the word choice, words are words, sometimes. So people, yeah, and of course, and whatever what's in our hearts comes on our tongues. So yeah, I appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm glad that that you came up with the idea, and you let us know that your work can be applied in college campuses, in mosque institutions, educators and parents, and it's and you address things from a human perspective, and you focus your work on empathy, so people can engage more with each other, and for the sake of sisterhood, for the sake of community building, and the betterment for our society and community. Jazakallah khair for this work. So where people can find more information about your work, contact you, collaborate with you in the future?
So I actually do, there's work I do in the classroom where I actually do workshops with children, but I also do training of teachers and school leaders, because sometimes school leaders recognize as a challenge. Like, I did when I did my master's in Islamic education, the particular thesis I focused on was research into belonging, because we understand the importance of belonging. People want to feel that when they're in a space, that they're supposed to be there, that the people in that space want them there, value them, and care about them, and have their best interests at heart. So you think about our schools. Our intention, when I say our schools, I mean the private Islamic schools that you find around the world or in the country. The intention of these schools really is to create a space where children can learn. They can learn leadership skills. They can learn this faith. They can learn the ethical guidelines to be able to be great human beings. And then whatever space they end up being, they just bring goodness into that space. I think this is what the goal is of our average Islamic school, or what they want to do. But the challenge, though, is that many of these spaces, because they don't focus on like the kind of character building that includes the understanding of anti-blackness, because many schools do focus on character building, but they're not understanding the terrain, i.e. this society, America, was built upon anti-blackness. The wealth you see, because sometimes people look at America is like how many years old, and yet it's so rich. It's so rich because of enslavement. That is how America built its wealth at such a fast pace. It's because of that particular model that was extremely cruel, extremely violent. And it was just an example of just really valuing wealth over everything else, over even people's well-being, So when we look at these things, it's important for us to just recognize that, our schools, for us to be able to rectify the situation that we see, i.e. the anti-blackness we see. Because what I saw in the schools is children were calling, like non-black children would call black children the word abid. That's what they would say to them. And these are children who are raised in America, but they've been this term has been transmitted to them, and they understand what it means because they say it to the black students. Or they will say things like khara, which means, excrement. Abid meaning slave. And the what really shocked me when I did this study, because I looked at Islamic schools around the country and I asked the graduates of Islamic school who were black. Some of them were African American, some of them were from the West Indies, some of them, their parents, some of their parents were from East Africa or West Africa. Some of them, one parent was Irish, one was Nigerian, and one was Jamaican, one was, African American. So you had a whole bunch of different, family formations. And there were about 64 people who were part of the study. And what most of these people who were part of the study said is that this word was either used to them or used in front of them, i.e. the word abid or the N word. And I'm thinking to myself, these are Muslim children in Islamic school, and many of the schools had no policy to deal with that. And if they did have the policy, they weren't implementing the policy. They would just say things like, oh, well, don't do it. Or excuse, or just forgive them, they didn't mean it. And I'm just like, when the Prophet ﷺ saw injustice around him, he addressed it. And there's two particular stories I'll leave with you regarding that. One of them is, the story of two companions, where one companion refers to the other one as, the son of a black woman, which is basically referring to his mother in her complexion, but also her status as being an enslaved woman. And when he says this, the other companion goes to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and complains to him. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, hears him, he is angered by it. And we know the Prophet didn't get angry about things. He was a kind of person who was very, his character was such that he was extremely patient, extremely forbearing. But when it was things that were wrong, you would know. And if it's things that, in terms of like how we treat each other, he would address it. So when the other companion comes, the Prophet tells him, and I see in the story such wisdom in the story, is that the Prophet tells him that you have some jahiliyyah in your heart. And the thing about this companion is that he accepts it, doesn't start to argue, doesn't start to talk about, well, I'm a great companion. Look what I did for Islam. Because this is the thing about this companion, about him, is that when he took his Shahada, he was one of the people who went to the Kaaba and proclaimed his Shahada publicly. And the Meccans, they come and they beat him up. And he doesn't get the next day, and they beat him. And doesn't get the next day because he loves this deen, right? And he's brave. So, but he doesn't complain. He doesn't give excuses. He doesn't deny it. He accepts it because of his courage. And we have to have courage. When we see things that are wrong, we have to have the humility and the courage to want to change things. And when the blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives him this knowledge of self, he accepts it. We have to ask ourselves, when people bring something to your attention, are we going to be arrogant about it? Or are we going to be open and listen and think, how can I make myself better? How can I fix this? And that's why in the story, even as an example of something that, is Jahiliyyah behavior, but it's a huge lesson for us on how to rectify things. And there's a huge lesson to want to be like this particular companion, that for whatever reason, maybe cultural or whatever, he has his ideas, but he's ready to fix it immediately because he understands the Prophet has given him that knowledge about himself and he wants to be better. And the other story is of after the Fatah Mecca, the opening of Mecca, when, the Prophet, he goes into the Kaaba with Ali and Usama and Sayyidina Bilal, they all go in and they're destroying the idols, because this is a whole new day. We don't engage in this kind of worship. We're done. And after that, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he asked, Bilal to scale the Kaaba, to stand on top of it and give the adhan. And when he does that, there's some of the Meccans who start to complain about his blackness. And one of the statements that was made is that could Muhammad not find anyone other than this black crow to stand on the Kaaba? Another one makes a statement that, I'm so glad my father isn't alive to see this black man standing on the Kaaba. So it's like this idea of bringing up blackness. And that's why I know we got a lot of these ideas from colonization, but it predates it. It's in some of our cultures, and we have to be honest about it. And it doesn't mean our cultures are bad. It doesn't mean we're bad. It just means this particular thing has to stop. And we have to do better, because when you know better, when you do better, when you know better, you do better. And that's what I see in the story. And when we ask ourselves, think about the great companion Abu Bakr. He was somebody who was against oppression. When he saw, Bilal being oppressed, he seeks to free him and he frees him. Think about Umayyah. He's somebody who's engaged in oppression in this story. He's the one who's placing the stone on the chest of Bilal, and and encouraging Bilal that, well, if you can just say one of the idols' names, I'll stop this persecution I'm doing to you. But Bilal is, he's steadfast, but he's an oppressor in the story. So we have to ask ourselves, who are going to be in the story of wherever we live in? Are we going to be one person who stands up to oppression? Are we going to be the oppressor? Or are we even going to be the person who has made the mistake and fixes it because they want to do the right thing, like the other Sahaba we mentioned?
Mm.
So we have to really like think when things are going on around us, not just to be so busy in our bubble and our silo, but just to recognize that we're all part of making change in society. We can all stand for what is right in society, inshallah. And then that was a long answer to your question.
Of course, no, I would love the elaboration and how you elaborate things and how you bring the human perspective in every single point where I'm asking you. And of course, we have to be, because we're Muslims, we have to withdraw the prophetic experience in every single, relationship we have, either if it's acquaintances or people we saw on the streets, and how we bring the prophetic example in all of our dealings, And I love how you addressed the intra-racism in the Muslim community, because this is a huge issue, but it was never talked about, or we just shy to talk about, or we don't, we don't acknowledge it, we don't talk about it, we don't. Yeah, that's the main point, and how you bringing the prophetic example, and this is your role model, the prophet. He's saying this, he's doing this, and there is nothing shameful about being an ignorant. There's people who are way better than you who have done this mistake and they fixed it. They accepted and they fixed it. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's our lesson. It's like, I know sometimes it can be a bit scary because it's hard to want to acknowledge when one does what's wrong. And that's part of the human being. But we have to be brave. We
Mm.
have to be courageous, especially we live in a world where there's so much evil around us. And those people who are engaged in evil are so committed to it. People have to stand for good and they have to be active about it. We can't just be bystanders, like, oh, that's someone else's problem.
Yeah,
You
if you
know,
haven't talked about it, it might impact you eventually. And you don't have to be on top of all of the things to fix it, but you can do it on your own level, with your children, with your
And it, and,
community.
and it just starts even just with that mindfulness, being aware and taking it to your Lord in prayer. And in the spaces that you have control over, i.e., the home that you have, how do you do things in your home? What
Hmm.
kind of mosques do you go to?
Mm,
Who comes into your home? You
mm,
know, just showing your own self. Because the thing about hard work that differs from some other like approaches to dealing with racial issues is that it's not about over there fixing things. It's really starting from within.
mhm,
It's not
mhm,
about just, oh, it's on my own solitary journey, but it's doing it together, i.e., as you are working on your own self, you're working in your sphere of influence, your sphere of control, your sphere of, these different spheres, and your sphere of concern through dua. So you're looking at all these different aspects of your life, not just, okay, one or the other, but we're doing all of this in tandem because nothing is too great for our Lord. And we take these things that our Lord, we're going to see miracles. But if we just remain silent and try to ignore it and think, oh, it will just go away if we don't talk about it, we know this doesn't happen. And that's why we have the gift of the Prophet ﷺ, because he shows us how to be, how to rectify things, how to be better, how to
mhm.
build society.
I will put in the comments your website and where people can reach out to you. But you just say it, so whenever the people who are listening to the podcast would capture it, the website and the email, how they can reach you out. What do you
Okay,
say? Mhm.
so www.rukayat, Rukayat Yakub.com. So that's my keyword, my main website where, the work that I do with school leaders and, community leaders, it's there. And then I have a publishing site because I also write children's books. I
Mhm.
really feel that we need more books. And I really want to encourage anyone who's listening to this, who's ever wanted to write a story, write a story. Don't just write one, write many, because we need stories. The thing about our children, especially because I write children's books in particular, our children, they have such a gift. They have the whole gift of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, and all these righteous people, all these different awliya who lived in different time periods. They also have the story of their lineage in Islam. But then every single Muslim story is their story. So when I read about the great people of Egypt or of Turkey or of Bosnia or Senegal or South Africa, these are all my story because we're all in this faith together, and even the stories of righteousness, regardless of a person's faith. For persons of righteousness, that is our story. So we need to be able to add to that so that our children, the other children, can get to read these things and discover and realize, oh, wow. These are things that I can be. I can be a scholar, I can be a writer, or I can be a leader who is just, or I can be somebody who's looking after my family. Maybe I'm not doing all these things out in the world, but I'm doing something amazing in my own home. And that thing that's amazing can look different to different people. Just even,
And what's the
especially in
website?
the world we live in today, it's really important.
And what's the publishing
So
website?
well, the website is lightlegacy.com. So it's lightlegacybooks.com. So
Mhm.
that's the publishing site. And then I have my regular site.
Okay. I'll
Feel
make
free
sure to
to
put those on the comments so people can reach out to you so they know how to collaborate. If
right.
they are having an initiative or want to host you, that would be great. Because we all need this work in our community, in our circles, and people have to have people who can train them how they can approach community so they can have better engagement in their cycles and their institutions and they don't how to learn how they not to turn people away because they are coming from different background or they are if not sharing the same culture. So it's better to have the proper training so we would do better. And
Amen.
I would love for you to tell me a story that inspires you or inspired you to keep this initiative, the Heartwork training, running up and running.
Oh, that's a great question.
Mm,
Oh, I think. Okay, so I can think of a couple of things, but one story, it's actually a sad story, but
mm,
it actually one of the stories that keep me going. It's a very short story. I was
mm,
talking to a sister, she's from the Caribbean. Her and
mm,
her husband both from the islands. They moved here, I think either as teenagers, they went to college, they became Muslim, they got married, they had children, and they put them in Islamic school. And the reason why they did that is that they have their own parents, alhamdulillah, but their parents aren't Muslim, but they wanted the Muslim community for their children. They
mm.
wanted a loving, nurturing community that would embrace their children. But when they put them in Islamic school, that isn't what they experienced. And they didn't know that because their knowledge of Islam, i.e., reading about it, teaches you that Islam is about community. It's about belonging. It's about this like loving connection between people who love God. But this isn't the experience she had where she had to take her children out. And anytime I think about that story, I don't really want to keep going. I want to keep going because I know there are people who put their children in these spaces because they deeply love this deen and they want their children to be around other Muslims. And we have to think to ourselves that how important is it for us to be so um what's it called, invested in anti-blackness? We don't have to do this. We could make a conscious decision to say, you know what? This is actually how I do act. And we have to be honest with ourselves. No one can do that for you. And when you recognize that, you have to let go of it and say, you know what? If our identity is that we're people of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, then we are people of there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger. And the reality is the ummah, i.e., the community of the Prophet is the whole of humanity. So, so really at a higher level, we have to really treat everybody with respect and with
Yes,
dignity, you know?
yes.
And I think that's one of the stories that really kind of keeps me, like, okay, gotta keep up with this work. Um,
And the second story?
on the second
You
story.
promised like two stories. You promised.
I think part of it actually goes back to my mentor, and I remember her telling us, about how many times that she was, turned away from different jobs that she wanted to do, but then she ended up building this organization that serves women from all over the world, like thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So sometimes when people say no or they're not so interested, I'm like, you know what? Inshallah, Allah has something better for me, and that's the reason why I'm not tied down working for this organization or that organization.
Mm.
That there is that time that I have can go towards writing these children's books, can go towards doing training. There's all these other things I can do. So just recognizing that sometimes when a door seems like it's closed, there's all these other doors that are open around us. And it's just being able to look
It-
look to
yeah,
the
it's
side.
not the door you're expecting. Yeah,
Exactly. So
yeah.
I don't know if those are good stories, but those are two things that I can think of that help me, that keep me going, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like your mentor's story is really resonating with me because I see wallahi, and it's really I'm just I feel frustrated when I saw my sisters take off their hijab so they can be accepted in companies and corporates and workspaces that they claim diversity thing, you know. So yeah,
That's the
so
true irony of that. That's the true irony of diversity is like, are you really diverse or you just want me to look just like every other woman in your office? And if I look like her, then you'll hire me. But if I don't, then you're not going to. Is that really diversity? You know?
and you know they are, and even if you're veiled and hijabi and you're just accepted in the workplace, they have their own rules. So is it really diversity? Is it, you know, they have those meetings and they are disrespectful for, you know, your cultural practices. They have all those drinks all over around and they don't even ask what you do and what you don't. So wallahi, if you have someone with peanut butter allergy, you would have accepted, you would have listened. Why the hijabi is the problem, you know? SubhanAllah.
And the thing about that is the awareness though, and there's the openness. Whereas I think if people could be more open and less judgmental, and that really comes across with anything, you know,
Yes.
because and part of it is the stereotypes. People have this idea that, oh, the hijab represents this. This is what this I'm going to see. And then you don't even know because you haven't even taken the time to even get to know the person. You're just judging them already by what you see, you
Yeah,
know?
ask respectfully and accept whatever they say. So it just people are different. You and it's all fine. If it's fine if you have people different around you. So the next question is about your book. I'm not sure if
Oh,
it's
my book.
I'm not sure if it's because I have a blurry image of
Yeah, it's
so
a little bit blurry, but
oh,
yeah. So the book is called
I'm
the
sorry. It's not
uh,
let's see.
Alhamdulillah. It's
Shall we?
called The Gift of Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, and
Hmm.
it's a children's book. I actually have a copy with me, so maybe I can go grab it if you want, because I don't have a background. And it's a children's book that is set in what is now West Africa, but this was during the colonial period. And one of the things about the story that made it is very powerful is that it gives a narrative of what was going on from the perspective of Muslims during the time that the French and the British and other European countries were colonizing a lot of the world, you know? And it gives us this idea of this boy who grows up with a deep love of faith, a deep love for Quran, a deep connection to really wanting to do what's good for his people. And just that just charts his story and it's told in a way that a child can understand. So that's
So I will, you know, I make sure to add a link for people so they can reach out and, you know, purchase themselves a copy. And what's the legacy you wanted to keep in your reader's mind after reading this book?
I want them to know that spiritual strength isn't something that we should undermine. We shouldn't belittle it. We should recognize that it's a very important thing that keeps us going. If you think about the story of Imam Hussein and the story of Karbala, it's a story of fighting for justice, right? But he doesn't, in the end, quote unquote, win. But the fact that he does the right thing is winning. And it's an example for us to stand up for what is right and recognizing that even in the world we live in today, it might be difficult to see the results of what we want to see, i.e., we don't want to see any injustice or any poverty or any mistreatment. But knowing that maybe you won't get to see that particular thing, but it doesn't stop us from working towards it. And that's why I see in the story is that okay, the French didn't just disappear because he was there, but but him being there and the work he did helped to neutralize some of the ill effects of the French because he taught his people not to be fearful of them. Because people can only really control you when you're afraid of them, when you're worried about, oh, they're going to take away my economics, they're going to take away my power, they're going to take away my wealth. And this is what, if you think about it again and again, especially the story of colonization, is a story of really Europeans taken advantage of the fear that they had put into the hearts of people because of the machinery they had or the technology they had or whatever it is that they had, that domineering practice and spirit, and recognizing that it's important to really know who you are, know who your Lord is, know why you're here, what is your mission on earth. Because we know that, we're created to worship God, but what does that actually mean? It really means like whatever you do with, out of your love of God is really your worship, right? And whatever you do is going to be what your mission is connected to what God has already facilitated for you, what's already easy for you. So if, for example, your mission might be to write, it might be to lead in different ways, it might be to teach. And these are things that you're going to find that you already enjoy doing. A lot, God has made this easy for you already. But then you have to lean into it. Because if everybody is doing that particular thing, we're actually bringing about the goodness that we want to see in the world. And yes, those people who are committed to evil might carry on doing that. Those who are committed to domineering and to whatever it is, but it shouldn't stop us from doing what we're supposed to do. It really goes back to that hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he says that if the day of judgment comes and you're planting a seed, finish planting it. So the idea is that not to lose hope, because that's one thing that we have that can't be taken away. And it's powerful because it keeps us going. You see that the people of Gaza right now is that there's just like this spirit of we're going to just keep on. May Allah Ta'ala reward them and give them, liberate them. I mean,
And all our brothers and sisters
all
everywhere
over
on
the world.
earth.
I
I
mean,
mean, I mean, and yes, absolutely. And I love how you said about winning this. The Imam Hussein, radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him. He didn't focus on winning, but he won already by doing the right thing.
yeah,
And I just want to add to this, winning the side of Allah is winning, is the absolute winning in dunya, even if it doesn't look like the
exactly.
ideal winning in dunya, it's the winning in akhirah. This is, yeah, absolutely. And we have example in the Quranic scripture. It's not only winning. Sometimes there is prophets that were rewarded by their people, brought back to the side of Allah and follow them, and they have their people who assign people follow them, and the side of spiritual side winning. But we also have stories that some prophets were rewarded this ending, the happy ending, uh, according to the dunya perspective, but they won the side of Allah already, and it's the side of Allah. Spiritual side is winning.
Yes.
Subhanallah.
And the importance of being able to look through at the world through those lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, obviously you don't lose sight of what's going on in this realm too, but understanding that things are just more than what they seem. And if we put all our trust and our focus just on what's in front of us, the material realm, we've already lost. So we have to always keep sight of that. And this story really reminds us of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to look up that where is the side of Allah, what Allah wants me to do, and that's should be the spiritual focus, should be your compass. Subhanallah. That's right. How do you think non-Black immigrants, white allies can benefit from your work and support your work? How do you think that would happen?
So I think getting to know what the work is, I think is the first thing. Because you might find that, oh, this is different from what I thought anti-racism work should look like. Or it could be, wow, this makes sense. I think getting to know what the work is and, engaging with
Just
the
highlight the name, Heartwork Training. That's the work
yes,
she's doing. Yeah.
Heartwork Training. So yeah, get to know what Heartwork Training is. Um,
Hmm.
there's actually a book I'm working on based on my thesis where I was, studying Islamic schools, and I'm praying that that will be out soon because that will really give kind of the data of what's going on in our schools and how we can really work on things to make it better. How we can work on it because I know there are lots of people who do want to make a change. Sometimes people don't know where to start. Sometimes, and also our teachers, our administrators, they're overwhelmed. There's so much that our schools are dealing with. So
Hmm.
many things that it's not always a priority. But what we don't understand is that if we can actually work together as a community and really value and respect each other, we can actually get a lot more done.
Hmm.
Because when we got that united front, there's a lot more power with our community. So
Hmm.
as long as the non-Black community refuses to benefit from the expertise, from the experiences, from the leadership of the Black community, we hold ourselves back.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. You don't turn people away and then accept them to engage in your programs and your schools and whatever. Absolutely. Yes. Engage and ask questions, learn from the expertise, collaborate together. So it was amazing having you today, Ustadha Ruqayya. I really benefit from meeting you. And that's the last question. If you have any questions for me, just let me know. Uh,
I just want to express gratitude. I've known you for a few years now and just see you consistently just working for the community and just, keeping going, even though things can be challenging. And I know this kind of work is hard. So I'm just grateful for you. And I want to say thank you because I think it's important to tell people when you appreciate what they do, to say
Jazakallah
thank
khair, Ustaz
you.
Ruqayya. It's an
God
honor
continue to
and a
bless you.
pleasure to have you. And may Allah bless you and your family and all of your loved ones. It was a great pleasure to have you today. And for all of the audience and watching or listening, please keep an eye out on the comments below so you know the legacybooks.com. Our website is shamafarag.com. HishamAlFarag.net, sorry, and I will post the emails where you can reach Ustadha Rukayat, or you can reach out if you
Yes,
wanted to
definitely.
collaborate, yeah, in the comments. And thank you for listening, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.